One of the more obvious characteristics that is shared by all of the different endoparasitic aliens from the Alien franchise is their elongated heads, a representation that is usually assigned to the sexuality that was the main theme of their life cycle, and the overall design of the alien created by H.R. Giger. But the shape may also include inspirations from artists both modern and historical, and has led to many theories of what is contained within it and how it functions. At the age of 5, the older sister of H.R. Giger would bring him to an exhibit on ancient Egypt at a local museum, and as fate would have it, in its basement was the mummy of an Egyptian princess. He was terrified of her blackened bones with patches of skin, but it led to fascination, and he would then return to see the mummy almost every Sunday after that. His wife Carmen said that the experience stayed with him, and that its themes of the black abyss in the cellar, her bones, and the Egyptian culture would influence his work massively, saying that if you look at the alien, it's not only black with bones protruding from under the helmet, but it has this elongated head that you see throughout Egyptian art, with this referring to images of the pharaoh Akhenaten, his wife Nefertiti, their daughters, and their son Tutankhamun. When looking even further into the artistic influences for Giger, I ended up on the Alien Explorations blog, where they referenced his connection to Ernst Fuchs. In 2000, Giger would tell Esoterra magazine that Ernst had been his greatest and deepest inspiration, and that he is the greatest artist alive today, and as a technician, he is absolutely fantastic. He knows his materials inside and out. If I had seen his work when I was young, I would have never begun to paint myself. He is a master and a close friend of mine, I am happy to say. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any record of when Giger was exposed to his paintings, but I'd be surprised if he hadn't seen them by the time he began his work on Alien. In 1953, Ernst would paint Behind Veronica's Veil, and in the bottom left corner is a skeleton-like figure with an elongated head that looks very alien. And a similar figure would appear in another painting of his from 1956 called The Angel of Death Over the Gate of Purgatory, though this time the figure has wings and is, of course, as the Angel of Death, far more menacing. Looking to some of his earlier works, in 1949 is The Temptation of the Victor, with the pale figure in the center of the painting having an elongated head, but more importantly, held in a hand below him is an elongated skull that very much calls to mind images of the alien skull. Strangely enough, a very similar skull would appear in another painting of his from the same year, Transformations of the Flesh, where it is also held aloft by a hand. Giger would call his own art style biomechanical, and it would often include characters with their head in this lengthened shape. His art book, the Necronomicon, had many of them, and one would eventually lead to the alien. Dan O'Bannon had previously worked with Giger on a failed Dune adaptation, and he wanted him to be the one to create his alien. The studio was appalled by his work, but Ridley Scott pushed to get him hired on. Scott knew that he had a great film and a great cast, but he was worried about his man in a suit for a monster, until he saw Necronom 4. Then he knew he had solved the biggest problem for the film. I also have to mention that the head of the creature in Necronom 4 definitely has a unique design to it. It's made to look like a penis, and sex is a common theme in Giger's art. The creature here also doesn't have legs and instead has its tail held up in its hand. Still, even so, it looks undeniably like the alien. The dorsal tubes and support piece were already there on its back, along with its biomechanical makeup with its ribs and exoskeleton exposed. They did remove the eyes though, and place a human skull underneath its faceplate. Looking to the practical side of the alien head design, H.R. Giger was not only an artist, he was also an industrial designer, and he wanted everything to have a function. So he thought that with the alien long head, that there was enough space inside for a long tongue, to which Ridley would add the idea of a full mouth on the end of it, giving us another major feature of the alien, the deadly secondary jaw. It would take a large group of muscles to slam that tongue out with the force that it delivers upon its prey, and the lengthened skull is what supports the muscles needed to perform this. Within the Aliens Expanded Universe materials would be many in-world attempts to explain the reasoning and biology of the alien elongated heads. The Aliens magazine from Dark Horse International would note that the creatures have sensory structures on the sides of their heads that can pick up sounds. They can also pick up heat signatures with highly sensitive thermoreactive organs located behind the skull's faceplate, which is itself constructed of the unusual C60 carbon lattice known to demonstrate exceptional conductive properties. In Alien's Labyrinth, Dr. Church would drain the acid from xenomorph specimens and fill them with a neutralizing agent, which combined with his own specialized protective suits, allowed him to safely dissect them. After removing the dome from the head, he would point to an organ near the temple of the skull behind the faceplate, saying that it interested him the most. The surface is lined with compound cells of fullerite-encased herlantium. The internal structure is solid neurons and 2 binary fans, very, very dense. And he thinks that this is the alien psychic receiver. The fullerite and herlantium pick up E-waves, and the binary fans create interference patterns from electromagnetic fields. It can receive brainwaves and allow the alien to assess other animals' physical characteristics by seeing its subtle body. He also talks about what he thinks is the alien's brain, an enormously complex neurological structure in the dorsal region. In the Aliens Colonial Marines Technical Manual, there's a communication between people inside of Weyland-Yutani who are looking into the encounters on LV-426. While doing so, they discover descriptions of aliens and images of facehuggers and begin to speculate on their nature and makeup. So what do we have on the alien sensory apparatus? Very little in truth. Optical is possible, though it's likely to be monocular, in which case it either isn't reliant on sight or uses some other sense for measuring distance. That could be ultrasound or simply good hearing. Having a long head case would suggest that it might have audio sensors at the front and back ends. If those are duplicated left and right, it would have quadraphonic hearing and hyper-accurate ranging capabilities. I'd guess it has good hearing, can sense floor and surface vibrations, with some secondary visual capability. Whether that stretches into the infrared is another matter entirely. Outside of the expanded universe materials, there's also some data from the AVP universe from the Weyland-Yutani archives on the Aliens vs. Predator Requiem Blu-ray, which states that the adult xenomorph cranium has an elongated and quasi-cylindrical physical structure. While conventional biological wisdom suggests that the disproportionate size of the xenomorph's head might indicate an enlarged brain, observed behavior and recorded anatomy deconstructions discredit this notion. Biological analysis confirms that the xenomorph cranium houses a complex system of nervous receptors, enabling high receptivity to environmental sensory input. Functioning as a conduit, the cranium houses bioelectrical communications receptors to keep adult xenomorphs networked in a collective hive consciousness. The cranium of a queen xenomorph is still elongated and cylindrical, but is additionally adorned by an ornate crest or crown. The crown serves a sensory biological function similar to an antenna, and it enables the queen to read bioelectric, biochemical, or thermal signals. The crown may also serve as a central receptor/transmitter for the collective consciousness of the hive. The Alien Covenant book, David's Drawings, has some interesting notions on the origin of the elongated skulls of the aliens, though it's important to note that Covenant was made with the intention of David being the creator of the xenomorphs. It's stated in the extras of the book, and in interviews with Ridley Scott, but its follow-up was never released. And now the expanded universe, more specifically the role-playing game, has called the alien that David created the Praetomorph, meaning David was not able to recreate the perfect Xeno and instead created the Praetomorph, something close, but not quite there yet. The book is still interesting as hell and has some amazing art and concepts in it. One particular page from the book, and its more complete example seen in the alien short The Advent, includes David's illustrations of his work with what appears to be mutated engineer infants that have these included notes. Experiments in head binding of chemically lobotomized. I'll add here that head binding is the physical act of using something to add pressure or to brace the skull of infants to change its shape. A theory of how the Egyptian and other misshaped skulls around the world came to be. It then says wide range spectrum cranial sensing and is referring to this example here. It seems that the humanoid orbits could be better served as thermal pits while the brain pan should be extended to allow for a broad spectrum reflector/reception area, biased towards dorsal alignment so as not to impede movement and access. Head movement would provide the panning and other axes, while intensity is concentrated towards the front as shown in A, with ocular and frontal areas overlapping. There's still coverage diminishing to B and then C. Extension is suggested at the rear as shown at D to evolve with overall growth and full spectrum effectiveness on maturation. Outside of the more ornate examples like the Praetorians and the Queens and Kings, what are your favorite elongated head designs? There are so many to choose from. You have the smooth classic xenomorph drones, followed by the opened up skull of Cameron's aliens. There's the strange look of the newborn, the pointy-headed examples of the deacons and neomorphs, the crossover pred alien, David's Praetomorphs, or maybe one of the crazy variants from the video games or the Kenner toy lines. Thanks for watching, take care, and I hope to see you next time.